Yes. I'm just sharing my screen. I have too many tabs open. Yeah, it's fine. I found you. So we're going to wait for people. Well, there are already 3 people. So I'm just going to take a minute to re-explain what is Simone, and then I will let you go ahead. You can, if you want, you can share your presentation in the meantime.
Yeah, I'm trying to see if I want to do the presentation or my whole screen, because I have a couple of like Google windows that I want to show a few extra things in.
Okay. Well, as you prefer. But yeah, for the newcomers here, just to reintroduce Simone, it's Simone Business Club that I created a few months ago. It's for fashion funders because I've realized like there are so many fashion funders everywhere in the world, but we don't have any specific space for like early stage fashion funders to find information. And so I organize this kind of event, like masterclasses every month online, where I invite someone, an expert on a topic, to talk about a specific topic. And I'm super happy to do this one with Lotto Zero because we've been talking about it for months. So we finally were able to organize it. So yeah, I'm super looking forward to see what we're going to talk about. And so, Lauren, I will let you present Lotto Zero and yourself and go ahead with the presentation.
Thank you. Trying to get my screen to come up. But as Romy said, I'm Lauren. I'm the project manager at Lotto Zero. And if you're not familiar with who Lotto Zero is, we are a creative space for culture and arts that revolves around the textile scene and fashion based in Prato, Italy, which is one of the biggest textile districts in Europe. We're very well known for carded wool and recycled wool. So it's also a center where there's a lot of activity around recyclability and circularity, not just recently as it's become such a hot topic, but also dating back to about the Middle Ages. So there's a really well-established history there.
Yeah, it seems so cool.
Yeah, so there's a lot of interesting things happening around the city, around the district. And our role is kind of this, I'd like to say, a bridge between the creative sphere and the kind of industrial production side of fashion and textiles. So we kind of work as that meeting point.
I think it's important to say that you invite like artists, but also like fashion designer, fashion people, because I feel like sometimes a lot of people don't feel that they belong in Lotto Zero, but you do.
Yeah, you do. You definitely do. So we also work with a lot of like small brands in particular that come and want to develop new techniques or products or experiment, find new types of materials that they can work with. And we also do a lot of European Union funded projects that are really centered around helping brands in particular to prepare themselves for this transition that we're seeing right now in the European Union, going towards a lot of sustainability requirements, but also documentation requirements. And while there's a lot of services out there for big brands that have a lot of budget to implement things, it's a lot harder for smaller brands and SMEs. So that's one group that we definitely work with to try and help them get on track.
Yeah.
So that's what we're going to be talking about today. I need to get my...
So basically, if you guys have any question about fabrics or about like European Union new laws or whatever, you go to Lotto Zero.
Okay. It's saying that I don't have permission to share.
Mm-hmm. I don't know if I should do something or...
I'm looking right now if I can. get it to come up.
That's fine. It's always this kind of problems.
Yeah, it says I don't have permission to share with recording, but I don't know why.
Because you're recording at the same time? That's why?
Maybe. I haven't had this issue before. So I'm not sure why it won't let me share the screen. Let's see. If I can't get it to come up, is there any way you can share it for me? I know.
Yeah. Okay, I've shared it.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, I'm not sure why it won't let me pull it up. So as I introduced, we're going to talk a little bit more in depth about some transitions that are happening in the EU, but really how you can prove that your brand is authentic and that it's yours. So let's take a look for a minute. What does that even mean, really?
I will try to do the slide at the same time.
So I want to start out with a question for everybody's reflection. So if someone were to copy your best-selling product tomorrow, whether that be a giant like, Shein or Temu, which we see really frequently, or even another creator, which does happen, unfortunately. So if that happened to you, or maybe it has already happened to you, how do you prove that it's yours?
I know there are some people watching that it just happened to them, so I think they don't have the solution.
Yeah, so this is kind of where the project of No Fake Fashion was born from, was this idea that how do small players protect themselves also against giants? So this is Otto Zero. If you want to follow along for more projects and things like No Fake Fashion, we talk about them in our newsletter and on Instagram, but that is our space in Prato. If you're not already familiar with it, we actually have an open call right now for fashion designers for a free 2-day workshop on how to design garments for recyclability, so to be recycled at the end of their life.
Wow,
so
that's so cool.
We have an open call right now. You can apply in our stories, and it's totally free to participate.
Nice. I'm not a fashion designer, but I would love to join.
So just another really quick look into the No Fake Fashion project. You can find our website online. It's just called No Fake Fashion. And within this project, we've created a kind of learning platform. So there are 12 different learning pills, and they're called this because they're really short and easy to digest. And it's all about how to help against counterfeits, to prove authenticity, and how to also communicate these values with your public. It also will take consumer participation, let's say, to make this happen. So you can find all of that here on our website. And you can also earn micro credentials if you complete these learning pills. So if it's something that you want to eventually put into a CV or use for other things, you can have it verified that you did in fact participate and pass the quiz. So. I think it's good to start out with identifying a little bit more what we mean by authenticity in fashion products. There's a lot of different ways to interpret this, as we see here. The first thing, at least that comes into my mind, is this product actually of the brand that it says it is? So when we think of resale sites in particular for like designer handbags, like, is this authentic? I think that's one of the most obvious layers of what authenticity means. But we can go a little bit deeper. So is this product actually what it says it is in terms of values, in terms of sustainability, in terms of fair production? What's behind it, really? We also look at a layer of authenticity as far as materials. A designer could even put in a purchase for fabrics, for example, and maybe that fabric composition isn't what it really claims to be, which unfortunately does happen sometimes. Obviously, choosing suppliers that you know and trust and that have good documentation can help to avoid this. But there's also a level of authenticity on materials. And we can think of authenticity also as far as cultural provenance. So different types of designs, patterns, fabrics, finishing techniques. Is credit being given where it should be? Is it what it claims to be? Is something hiding behind this that isn't being communicated properly? So this is another level of authenticity, which we also hear a lot as kind of, cultural appropriation.
Yeah.
A claim like made in Italy is a big conversation. We're obviously based in Italy, so for us, this label is really important, and it's become a little bit more controversial, let's say, over the years. Like, what does it mean to be made in Italy? It only requires, a certain percentage of your garment to be assembled in Italy to be labeled as made in Italy. So this can be a layer where we lose a little bit of authenticity if we can't really back it up with some credible proof to show that it really is made in Italy.
Yeah, I think like there is a big problem with authenticity because there's like people need to trust your brand, and for this kind of information, like a lot of brands had been lying for a long time, and so people don't believe you anymore. So yeah, you do need to have real proof.
There's a really big difference between, narrative claims and documented proof that a product really is what you say it is. And this is not a bad thing for brands. This can actually be a strategic point if they know how to implement it correctly. So the last point of authenticity is your design itself, let's say. Is it yours? Can you prove it's yours? And we'll look a little bit at that. So these are just some really quick examples of some small independent designers who have posted their work on Instagram and then later gone on to find it on sites like Shein. This problem is becoming a lot bigger, and unfortunately, it's kind of unavoidable. I think we rely on the internet, digital images, sites like Instagram or Pinterest or even Etsy to be able to market and sell fashion products, particularly small brands. So if that's where your products become vulnerable, it makes it complicated. The more success that you have, the more likely it is that it's going to be stolen, because these sites, they track the popularity of an object. So what's getting a lot of views, what's getting a lot of likes, what's being shared, and they steal the most popular things that they can recreate.
Yeah, some people think like when another brand is copying you, it means that you're successful, but it's another point of view.
So to some level, I mean, maybe yes, but still it's a problem.
Yeah, for sure.
Even if it means you have a good product and people are interested, and that's good, but you also don't want someone else making an inferior product at a lower price and passing it off from your work and creativity, really, because you're the one who did the work.
For sure.
So It's definitely something to address, and unfortunately a complicated problem to address. So I think if you're not already doing this, the first line of defense is, how do you even know if your product's being copied? We've heard from a lot of designers that they didn't find their products copied, but somebody reached out to them on Instagram or through email and said, hey, I found this sweater that looks just like one of yours on Shein. Mm. So if someone hadn't reached out to them, they wouldn't even know about it if you don't come across it yourself. So it's a really simple kind of like first monitoring line is, I would say, take your most popular product and run it through a reverse image search to see if any similar items pop up anywhere online. So you can do this really easily with Google Image or TinEye, which works very similarly to Google reverse image search. Okay. So this is a good first way to kind of monitor, like, is this even happening? And so we kind of need to look at, let's say, 3 layers of protection towards authenticity and anti-counterfeiting. So I think the first one is what a lot of brands focus on, because it's also a part of what a lot of brands use for marketing, is your narrative. So like, what's your identity as a brand, as a label? What are your values? What are you communicating to your customers? So I think this is where most brands already have some footing. So we won't focus too much on this right now. And we'll look more at the second 2, which is traceability and verification, which are 2 different things. Traceability and like transparency, or saying that something's true, are kind of a 2-step system, let's say. So traceability is more about the documentation behind your product. And verification says, okay, is that documentation actually true? Or did you kind of, make it up? And is this information that exists maybe in your back office, is it accessible to people? So is it accessible to governing bodies that need to audit and check to make sure that you are meeting sustainability requirements, particularly for places like the European Union? And do your customers have access to this? So can they access the information behind a product in order to make informed choices and to shop their values? And this is actually where it can become strategic for brands, because, Shein, Temu, they might be able to copy an aesthetic of your design, but they can't necessarily create the same product of the same quality at what they're often doing is a much lower undercut price. So your product isn't just your product. It's also everything that goes into making it. And that can become part of your story and your marketing to help build community and to allow your customers to also have a bit more empowerment about what they're buying and their reason for wanting to buy your designs. So we'll take a minute to look at this idea of documentation, which is essentially building the proof for your products. And this is really important. Also, if you later on come to be copied, so not just for selling to your community, but also providing the proof that these designs, this process is yours. So this means essentially, can you track the story of your product all the way back to, let's say, the cotton fibers of your t-shirt? Can you show each step that it took from fiber to yarn to fabric to where they constructed it up into the packaging and the shipment and even where it's sold? So this is kind of like a daunting task, I think, for a lot of small brands, especially if you don't have somebody who can focus just on this, just on building the documentation and the proof behind the production. And then how do you manage all of these documents? How do you organize it? What do you do with them? It takes a lot of continual maintenance. But it's important to at least start thinking about, because in it's already law, actually, that fashion and textile products in the European Union will require digital product passports, which is
this year. I think it's this year for the big brands, but
so technically it's already law, but it's not in an enforcement period yet.
Okay, so it's gonna be next year, or
yeah, right now it's saying from 2027.
Okay.
So like towards the end of 2026, beginning of next year is when we're going to start seeing more enforcement. There's already a lot of brands that have this in place, but it's going to become necessary for everyone. And there might be some, they won't be exempt. Small brands won't be exempt, but they might have some leniency in regards to someone like Zara, who obviously, one, has a lot more products, and two, a lot more resources.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, so basically the collections they are working on right now, they already need to have the information for next year.
Yeah, because we're already working on 2027.
Yeah.
So if you're looking at suppliers, this is information you want to start saving and structuring. And you can start out relatively simply, and we'll see that here in a minute. So with all these documents and things that you're going to be getting as you're developing collections, so what do you do with it then internally? How do you structure it to make it useful then for a DPP? So there are a lot of different ways to go about doing this. I think maybe the best kind of starter is to simply just use things like Excel, Google Drive, and Google Sheets to try and organize your information. You might want to create different folders for different product lines or different suppliers. If you want to implement more of structured help, let's say there are apps that kind of track even workflows, so like Airtable and even Notion, where you can create essentially these sheets inside of them, insert all of your data where you can filter. But here it becomes a little bit more of a function, kind of like a personal database, also with some AI insights that can help you to make sense of some of the information. But I think if you don't have a lot of resources as a small brand, person power and monetarily, just starting to collect and structure your information in Excel's in a Google Drive is a good start.
Yeah, I think for fashion designers that can feel like very scary, like all of this, like Notion and Excel, everything, but it's not that complicated. Like at the beginning, I know it can feel like you don't understand anything, but go ahead, you will get it.
And I think like Excel and Sheets are a good place to start, because when you create these files, it's then easier later on if you want to switch to a different system to upload Excel files and import data that way. So you don't have to necessarily commit right away to something that's a little bit more, let's say, needs a little bit more intensive user knowledge, but it can still help you later on when you do get to that stage, which is why I think it's a good place to start.
Yeah, for sure.
So once you've gotten your supplier information in, your Google Drive, your Excel sheet, how is it arriving to your customers, and how are we making sure that it's, it is what it says it is? I have in a few slides some specific questions that you can start asking suppliers to help you build up this kind of database and get to a point where you can verify everything that they've said or that they provide you with, so like actual documentation, and come up with a strategy to like, how are you going to make this visible then to, an auditing group or your customer, which I think is, I wouldn't say the most important, but I think for brands, it's the most exciting because it has a little bit more potential as far as like growth and visibility and your community. Let's say. So this is where the actual like digital product passport enters the scene. It's a digital document. So we kind of imagine there's a lot of different forms, but here is like an app, let's say, or a web page within a mobile app or shopping site, let's say, where all the information you've collected and sorted through and worked is going to become connected to an actual product. So this is essentially the digital version of your physical product. Everything that that product is and that went into making it now is contained in this digital twin, is what the terminology you might hear if you're looking more into this in the next year that they're using. So yeah.
I think for like brands in general, but even more for small brands, a lot of time there is this thing that even if you're working in sustainability, you're always afraid to give, like, to talk too much about sustainability, and it's a bit boring for clients. But I think it's good to have the information available for the clients that are very into it, and so they can go find all the information.
Yeah.
And the one that don't care, they will just not look at it. That's fine.
And I think one of the risks too about sustainability is, as far as like marketing and consumer awareness, is it's starting to become a little bit less of a buzz term because we've used it so much over the last years. And there's also this big question of like, what does that mean in terms like sustainable, green, responsible? They're kind of these empty terminologies that, if you're not really careful, can actually kind of cut down on some of your credibility, and people do start to lose interest. So if you have this document, it says exactly what it is. You don't have to keep repeating, sustainable, better for the environment, this and that. You eliminate the risk of being repetitive, of losing some interest, and also being called out potentially for unintentionally even greenwashing.
Yeah, because sometimes I see some brands that say like they're sustainable and ethical and everything, and when I go on their website, there is very little information, and so I'm just like, I just don't trust them,
And I think too, when we really talk about sustainable fashion, the best thing to do would be not produce, which is obviously not what we are doing. So doing it in a more responsible way, but how do you communicate that then? I think maybe we need to revisit. So let's talk for a moment about intellectual property in fashion. So I'm sure some of you have trademarks for your brands, probably around logos, names, or more like marketing and branding things. So that's actually the side of IP that functions in fashion. When you're looking at protecting an actual garment design, things get a lot more complicated. So for a couple of different reasons. One is that something like your trademark, your logo, your colors, those are things that don't tend to change very often about your brand. So when you go through the time and money that it takes to go through a trademark process, it's worth it. When we look at garments itself, it's a lot harder to, one, protect a design, because you can go through the IP process, get a protection, and then if it's changed even just slightly by a competitor, it's already outside the realm of protection. So just these small changes that things like Shein or Temu can make already risk it not being under that protection that you went through time and money to do. And another issue is that there are different levels of IP. So we can look at it on a national scale, Europe, or even global. So when you're a European company trying to fight IP in China, it's actually not very helpful. So actually, trademarking and patenting designs itself isn't a very effective approach on how to protect yourself. So we're going to take a look at a few actions that you can take. It's important to keep in mind, though, that these are reactive. So things that you can do once you found that something is infringed upon or your design has been stolen. The first is a classic cease and desist letter. So this is not in itself a legal action. It's kind of, I want to say a threat, but kind of an introduction to, we will take legal action if you don't. So you can send this to either, a small brand or larger brands like, or, multi-sellers like Shein and Temu. Part of the issue with
can you do it by yourself, or do you need a lawyer?
You can do it by yourself, absolutely. And I think that it's gotten easier to do it by yourself because AI prompts are good at this.
Yeah.
There are sites online where you can go and get kind of like an internet lawyer to do it for you, but you can also create a prompt into ChatGPT and have them write you an official cease and desist letter. So because it's not an actual, legal action, you're not taking them to court, you're not actually suing them. This is saying that we will take legal action if you don't. So a couple of things I included a little prompt here. It's kind of general and you need to insert the specifics of your situation, but that you can use in something like ChatGPT to help you generate a cease and desist letter. So you definitely need to include a clear description of the IP violation. So what has been stolen from you and how? A demand for them to stop immediately, to take everything off of their websites and off of sale. A deadline by which they need to comply. And a statement that legal action will follow if they do not. So this is just the beginning, and some people will respond and then others will say, no, this person isn't actually going to follow through with legal action. And because you have to go through a legal system, it can take a long time to get a final result here. So when we're looking to at fashion cycles, which can be relatively brief, even if you're someone who releases, let's say, 2 seasons a year, by the time you reach the end of this process, it may or may not be worth it. So if it's a product that you sell all year repetitively, then this might be a better approach. If it's something that you have out for 1 season that you're not going to reproduce again, it might already be done and offline before you see any results from a legal system.
But just to make sure to understand, like as a creative, whenever you create something, it's yours. Like you don't have to sign anything or whatever. Just because you created it, it's yours everywhere in the world. Or
so let's go to the next slide.
Okay.
Here is documentation. So it's actually a lot easier to create, let's say, documented proof that this design is yours than you think. So the key is to basically save everything. Because it is one of the kind of gray areas is saying like, okay, like I created it, so it's mine. And it's still up for debate a little bit. Like, okay, so who created the white t-shirt? Is it theirs? Is every white t-shirt that's created then a copy of their white t-shirt? And to be honest with you, this I don't have a set answer for. It's a debate that's gone on a little bit, but yeah, if somebody copies your design, essentially, there's a certain percentage that they have to change it, basically, to say that it's a different product. The best way for you to be able then to say, like, I created this design, it's mine, save your creative process, document it. Are you sketching? Are you creating mood boards online? That's all part of your documentation that proves that this product is yours. So don't undervalue it. It's important that as you go through this process, you save it. So like, if you're someone who likes to sketch in sketchbooks, scan them.
Yeah, or just take a photo with your iPhone so you have the date with it. And
yeah, something with a timestamp is important. And even if you just like email something to yourself, for example, that creates a timestamp on that material. So even if you want to do it that way, you can set up an email account. Maybe that's just for things that you email to yourself to be able to keep documentation and timestamps, for example. So it doesn't have to be something, you know, registered and super official, but that shows that I did this on this date and this time, and this is the first place that it appeared, essentially, even if it didn't appear publicly. So things like sketches, prototypes, save version histories, document any changes that you've made to designs over time. Another thing is if you have old things, maybe you're cleaning up your Instagram, you want to change your aesthetic a little bit. I would suggest don't delete photos, archive them so that you still keep them there with a timestamp. You never know. You could find something 6 months later. And if you go through and delete things, then you don't have that proof and documentation that you then need to take action. So keep everything, even, you know, emails and things with suppliers that discuss specifics. One thing you can do when you are sending emails and things with suppliers is ask them to sign non-disclosure agreements. Is also a step that you can take to protect your designs. In some cases, when we look at like second and third contractors for suppliers, there might be some risk there as far as designs or specifics being stolen or infringed upon. So already, like NDAs will help you then too if you later need to take action against something to show that there's been a violation. But diligent documentation, keep everything, and make sure that there's a timestamp on it. Because this is also the proof that you will need to back up like a cease and desist letter. And it's also the same proof that you're going to need in our next point, platform reporting. So comparatively to a cease and desist letter, this can be a little bit quicker as far as getting a response because you're not necessarily going through an entire, you know, legal procession. But platforms like Instagram, Etsy, Shein, they all have reporting sites where you can go and report stolen products. But a key to doing this is they ask you to provide a lot of documentation. So documentation of things that you found online that are stolen from you. So screenshot, keep histories. If you find it stolen in one place, go and do Google searches to see if it appears other places. All of these timestamps, sketches, whatnot that show that it was yours, that it was first on your computer before it ever went onto Instagram or anyone else's shops, for example. It's still a frustrating process to go through platform reporting. It's not always successful, and something that can happen is that a product could be taken down, especially when we think of like, you know, Temu, things are coming from different sellers, different producers, let's say through Temu. It's not just like one singular person selling and producing all these things. So what they can do is when you submit a report or a claim through their portal that there's been an infringement, they can take that product down and within like an hour, basically open up another shop and open up the product again.
Yeah.
So it kind of becomes this wild chase that is incredibly time consuming and frustrating, especially for the smaller brand that might not have as much time and resources and also needs to like run a company and, you know, design garments and produce things to keep up with something like this. So it's an action, but it's not a perfect action. So what's happening right now is we need to shift from, you know, claims and storytelling to proof and evidence. And yes, it is a legal requirement that DPP will be coming into place in 2027, but this is where it becomes an asset for you, is that it takes away some of the extra work once you have a system in place. And it makes it easier to show this proof documentation as yours. I think it's also important to notice that as a business strategy, it's good for companies because you can also gather a lot of data through this from your suppliers and maybe like see where your product in its production is not being efficient, where it can be improved. So I know it's a scary thing to kind of start diving into, and it's going to be difficult at first, absolutely. But keep in mind all these little benefits because it can actually have a good payoff for your brand. So we've probably all heard a little bit about what's going to be in the DPP, what it looks like. To be honest, it hasn't all 100% been decided how this is going to work out and look, even on like the government level. So there's some things that will definitely be required, and this is more basic information. So like manufacturer, supplier, any type of, safety considerations, which do also exist for textiles, but maybe we think of more with things like electronics and batteries and whatnot, because they'll also be having DPP. One thing to think of, which maybe isn't already kind of like this other information included in a lot of, clothing tags, because a lot of this is, the difference here is that a DPP has all the documentation to verify what's in a clothing tag, is they want to include kind of what do you do with it at the end of its life? Do you have a take back or recycling program? What can I do to responsibly dispose of this garment? So if this isn't something that your brand is already thinking about or has in place, it's another strategy, one that can be useful to you, but how do you want your customers to, deal with your garments once they're no longer wearable? And is it something that you can take back? Can you create a service to deal with this, to create a value stream on another way that's not just dealing with your product? I think is an interesting question, but it's something that's going to have to be included in this DPP.
Okay.
So
and there are some companies that are taking care of that, because for a small brand, it might be complicated to have this kind of service, but you can work. I don't have the names right now, but there are some companies taking care of that. So it might be easier.
This is one of the areas that is, let's say, seeing a lot of opportunity and booming with new services based just around garment recovery.
Yeah.
Absolutely. So this is what a DPP could essentially look like on your product. So how are we accessing them? You can, I think one of the simplest ways to start approaching this is to incorporate QR codes, because you can print them onto clothing tags. So let's say you gathered all your information in traceability and you want to make it available to your public in a way that's not, too intensive with a lot of different programs or, chips embedded into your clothing itself. You can essentially create pages for your product where you store all this documentation and information, and people can access it through a QR code being printed on your clothing tag. I can open the QR code with my phone and access all of this DPP information. I think this is one of the more accessible ways to start.
So really every brand has to do it by themselves? Like there is no like official website or no?
Yeah. As far as, something by the government, let's say, to support this implementation, no, not so much. But there are companies, this is another area that is starting to boom, is basically fashion tech service providers. So I have 3 examples in a later slide. The issue with some of that is it's expensive.
Yeah.
Which is why we see a lot of like bigger brands. Like this is the example of one. So this is a product passport for a sweater from ArtKnit Studios. And this is embedded into their product page on their website. So when you go to shop on their website and you scroll down to the bottom of their product page, you find this widget that's interactive. So you can keep clicking buttons and find documentation for certifications and this and where this factory is, details about it. And this is powered by a company called Renoon. And essentially the way that Renoon works and supports brands in creating product passports is you kind of create like a product sheet, let's say, for your garments, which is all of the information about the suppliers, the materials, the fabrics, etc. You upload it into the Renoon platform, and then they go and verify everything for you. So it's also like a third party, which makes it even more trustworthy. So this information gets saved into Renoon about different suppliers and manufacturers. And the cool thing is the more that gets uploaded and the more that gets saved, the more information that already exists there. So it kind of like builds upon itself, and they power these like embedded, let's say, web widgets for you into your product page. So this is, I think, the company that I've seen Renoon the most frequently out of people who have already embedded or incorporated product passports into their product line.
Yeah, in France we have Fairly Made. It's another. They do exactly the same, but yeah, and they work with some big companies and small brands, and there might be others in other countries, I guess.
Yeah, I mean, they'll definitely work with small brands. I think it's more just like, is the small brand limited by their own budget or,
for sure,
manpower? I think that's the number one thing. So here is another example. So Monobi is an Italian brand. They're actually from here in Prato. And I've included this temporary QR code because they have a really good example, I think, of a product passport. They have NFC chips that are embedded into their clothing. So it's basically the same technology when you go to use a tap to pay credit card. If you hold your phone up to this little tag that's on their clothing, it's not a removable tag, it's like their brand label essentially. It opens up this web page and it's only accessible on mobile, which is why right now I've created this temporary QR so that you can see it.
Yeah, I'm just looking at it.
Yeah, I can't send you like a URL via email and it'll open on your computer. So this is accessible mobily. And I think it's a really good example of the kind of depth of information that you can find there and the way that it can actually be interesting too for your customers to go in and explore and interact with your garments and on a deeper level. This, as compared to what we just saw with Renoon, you have to be in person with the garment to be able to access this. They also have Renoon on their product web pages, but it appears differently than the experience you get when you're interacting with the garment itself. Important note here for anyone who's thinking, wow, this brand has a lot of detail in this app, is that Monobi has a mainly internal supply chain. So they even like are part of a brand that grew out of a textile company here in Porto. So, I mean, they can grow their own fibers in Puglia and then they make their own fabrics. So it's made it a lot easier for them to be able to gather all this information and put it into a DPP.
Yeah, for sure. But it's also like, I'm always saying, like when you create a brand, it's always better to have those sustainable goals and like to be sustainable from the beginning, because you're creating all your processes like that. It's way easier than just trying to do it like after 5 years, like if your brand is already 5 years and then you're like, okay, let's become sustainable. It's a nightmare. So it's better to do it from the very beginning.
Yeah, I think the same here with the DPP right now. Even if you're like not sure how you want to implement it, just like start saving all your documentation, start talking to suppliers, and I'll give you some questions that you can start asking suppliers right now that will help get you in the position to be able to implement this a little bit easier.
Yeah, you should do it step by step, because if you want to do everything in one moment, it's overwhelming.
It is, absolutely. So like, what can you do right now? This is just an example of some companies that are providing DPP services. This last one, Erne, I've only seen it written. They're working a lot with companies in like the electronics field in particular.
Okay.
So it's not just fashion and textiles that are going to have these requirements, but we're one of the first for sure. Okay, so what can you be asking suppliers as you're working on your next collections to get you in the right position, to not be totally overwhelmed with having to go back and do all of this retroactively? So there are a couple basic traceability questions, which most likely all brands are already asking, and if you're not, you should be. But where is this material coming from? Who's packaged it? And if you're asking the specific supplier, what is your specific role? from what point to what point in the production. This is kind of the really like basic information that already just ordering suppliers, you probably most likely have. But it works through a couple of different levels, and this should remain available online for anyone to come back and if they want to consult or write some of it down. But it builds all the way up to, I think, number 7 is something interesting that we should point out right now, is asking suppliers directly, are they ready to be transparent with you and to basically help your products be compliant in product passports? Because in any type of production, there's often a level of secrecy about not wanting to reveal too much information that hurts your competitiveness. So there's definitely some resistance from companies to, participate and to share information. The catch is that anyone who's selling these products needs to be compliant. So also upfront, especially if you're meeting with any new suppliers and evaluating new people that you want to work with, ask them like, what are they already tracking? What kind of data formats are they using? Like, is it something that they can easily like share with you when you need it? How willing are they to have open conversations and, comply with you? I think this is where forming relationships is really important, to not kind of just like disappear, but invest also in selecting suppliers that are going to work with you, share your values, but that you also feel like you can build a personal kind of trust and relationship with, because that's going to make your life way easier when it comes to actually getting the documentation that you need to back up the claims that your suppliers are making to you.
Yeah.
So, yeah, it's going to be a battle, but if you want to remain competitive and they do too, we'll find a balance.
Yeah, it's super hard when you start a brand to find suppliers first, and then to find good suppliers that are ready to give you all the information. It's very hard, but I think it's super important because you avoid a lot of problems afterwards.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, and especially when we start talking about, enforcement of DPP, and then also proving your compliance to all of the new sustainability regulations around textiles and fashion in the EU. So yeah, supplier relations are about to become even more important than they already are.
Yeah,
for sure. And I wanted to kind of leave you with, let's say, kind of a reflective activity to start thinking about your brand. Or let's say if you have a best-selling product, that's a great place to start. Thinking about if you had to basically prove your supply chain right now, think about it. Where, if you go backwards with that product, how far back could you get with documentation and proving where it comes from? Where do you get stuck? If you're working back and you get stuck, like, okay, what is it, the information then that you're missing specifically that kind of breaks your chain? And then maybe go back to some of the questions in the previous slide and say, okay, so what are some of the questions that I'm not asking now that I need to implement to be able to fill this hole and keep the chain going back? I think it's a good reflective exercise to get kind of a general idea of where you're at right now too. How much do you know or can prove about your own product? And then start building up kind of a strategy from there. So as I mentioned when we started the masterclass, this is part of this project called No Fake Fashion that Lipto Zero is working on. We've completed the online courses that go into detail with different aspects of authenticity, IP, traceability, AI, etc. There's 12 of them online, and we'll be coming out with a toolkit this summer, I think June or July.
Okay.
So a little bit more like practical guidance that you can go back and reference as you're working through some of these issues of implementing, traceability, protecting your brand, and implementing DPP. So if anyone who's on the call right now is willing to scan this QR code and give some feedback, the project and Zero would really appreciate it. It's part of what helps us continue to be able to do these projects and create all sorts of free information for the design and art community.
Yeah, and if you don't have the time right now, we'll put the link in the Substack where we'll put the replay and all the links that you need.
Great. And follow along to Zero, or reach out to me if there's other questions, if you want to get involved with some of our project activities too, where we sometimes hold in-person workshops as well, if there's anyone in the area. And project activities are all free of charge, including the platforms and any type of learning materials that we can provide you with.
So cool. Well, that was great. Thank you so much, Lauren. It was super interesting. A lot of information, super interesting. So
Thank you for joining me.
Yeah, so there will be the replay available. So if anyone wants to rewatch it and pause and take some notes, it will be available, I think, like maybe tomorrow on the Substack. So yeah, great. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
And everybody have a good day. And see you next month then.
Good.
Bye.
Bye.